Yo, yeah, yeah. I need a J.O.B. The bills are coming in and the money is going out. I guess it's gonna be ramen noodles again. Yo, without a doubt. Don't got money to put gas in the car. Don't guess I'm going very far. I can't pay the lights or the heat. I barely have enough money to cover this beating. I guess my economics teacher was right. I better get up and find me a J.O.B. tonight. All right. So today we're going to be covering labor markets and jobs. So let's get to it. Got a lot to hit today. Um, Labor market is an area of the economy in which jobs are offered and accepted. Wages, that is the amount received by workers for their labor. Remember, labor is one of the factors of production. Wages are paid for the time, energy, and skill of the worker. Supply and demand affects wages, but there are also many other influences like education, culture, skills, competition, location. So there's a lot of variances in to determine what a worker gets paid. Wage equilibrium. Just like any other good and service, labor wages fall and rise with shortages and surpluses until a new equilibrium equals out. So if there are a whole lot of somebody who do a specific job, let's say there are a lot of teachers at the moment, well, then teachers aren't going to be all getting paid a whole lot. But on the other hand, let's say there's a shortage in factory workers. Well, then factory workers are going to be getting paid more because there are less of them and you got to offer them incentive to come and actually work for you. Reverse wage, though it's the lowest amount a worker is willing to accept for a job. We all believe there's a point that based on our skill set, based on our education, based on all these things about us, there is a certain amount we believe that our time is worth. If you're going to pay me $2 an hour to go do this job, I don't think so. That's not even going to pay my student loans. So there is a point that we hold ourselves to. And time is a limited commodity to us. If you actually sleep the 8 hours a day that you're supposed to, you only have 16 left in a day. So how much is that time actually worth to you? What is your reserve amount? How much will it take for you to go and do this job? The flip side of that, employers have a maximum wage, which is just like the employee's reserve wage, but it's on the opposite side. They have a point to where they are not going to pay any more for this position. Sometimes there's a lot of in the job markets. A lot of times in the job markets, a position has a range that the salary will be in or the pay will be in. I know at one point when I was a manager of the store, actually at the time I was assistant manager, I'd worked myself up and got enough pay raises to where I was the highest paid assistant manager, and I hit that cap. I hit that maximum wage for that position. The next thing I had to do was become a manager. So you have these maximum wages that employees are willing to pay. And a lot of this, depending on your scale in there, is how much productivity you do, your skill. And then when I was working for that particular company, I was one of its top salesmen nationwide. And so that's why I was able to get to that top and be one of the top paid assistant managers. Labor market does not actually equal free market. There are a lot of complications like job specialization, uh, so that it's not actually a pure free market. Because some people are specialized in jobs. I couldn't just go do a mechanic's job because though I might know a small amount about mechanics, I couldn't figure out near half the stuff they do. I couldn't go become an underwater welder. Uh, because I have no idea what's really involved in that. I knew a guy once who did that. Because there were very few people who do it, they make a lot of money. And there's a lot of risk involved in that. So job specialization, not just anybody can walk in and take a job. And like I said, there are limits for most of the workforce for particular jobs. Some jobs require, very specific things for you to be able to do it. And the workforce is a collective term for the people who work at jobs. The labor pool. It's the number of workers who are relatively fixed, at least in the short term. Okay? So you can't, let's say, altogether right now, let's talk about teachers. Let's say there are 50,000 teachers in the United States. And we're just using a fictional number here. Okay. Well, it's really hard to just change that all of a sudden. Let's say we have another 10,000 teacher jobs to fill. Well, you can't just all of a sudden increase that, because think every year you're going to have some retire, and then every year you're going to have, or leave the education field. Some are going to retire, and every year you're going to have some coming in and out of college, graduating with a degree. Well, if everybody decides to go into it all of a sudden, they are still going to have to go through that 4 years of college. Also, you have to look at, birth rates. Birth rates take time to affect the labor pool. Let's say we're just talking about normal everyday jobs, that you don't need a degree for. You're going to need to increase the population in order to draw from the labor pool. Imagine a small town in which there are only, a handful of young people to work all those jobs that normally young people have, like, either fast food or at the gas station or at the grocery store doing the baggage. And so that labor pool might be small until the birth rate picks up there in that town, and then eventually, as those kids grow up, there's more people. And one way to change this at a quicker pace is immigration. And this is one thing that there are a lot of issues people argue over, is that immigrants come in and add to this labor pool, so they're taking away from jobs of people who actually live here. So that's one of the arguments over that. Cultural influence. Some cultures don't allow women to work. It's become now in the United States where women can work. But 100 years ago, that wasn't so. Women didn't really work. They stayed home and took care of the household. But now it's become now in our culture that women can work, but other cultures still are like that. Child labor. There's a lot of rules against children working. Even if you're in high school, you got to have special permits and different things to get jobs. Globalization is affecting this as well, because it's increasing the interconnectedness of people and nations throughout the communication, trade, and the exchange of ideas. And people can work, if it's a job over the computer, well, they could have people working on it in China or England or different places and doing that work, sending it in from there. Depending on how you see things, this could be good or bad for the U.S. economy. It means we could, we could increase our productivity because maybe we get some great people from these places. But it also could be bad because we're sending out jobs out there. Or it could be good because we're able to pick up jobs in different places around the world. So this adds and decreases jobs to the labor pool. The global free trade. Free trade is free market system between countries with limited or no trade barriers. Okay, trade barriers are policies that reduce or eliminate international trade. Things like tariffs, which are tax on international trade, like we tariff a particular import or that's coming into your country. A quota system that limits the imports or exports of certain goods, or a subsidy. Governments pay payment to someone in a particular field. A lot of times, for example, farmers are subsidized because we all need the food provided by farmers, and so the governments tend to subsidize those to make sure that they do well and keep into that industry. So we set up free trade with some places, and these free trade zones, like we've had free trade agreements set up with Mexico and so forth. There's more free trade zones and partners than ever before now due to this globalization. Outsourcing, sending a job from one place to another. This is a big deal right now that we send a lot of our jobs over to places where they have cheaper labor. So they outsource this job. They send it somewhere else. Uh, Now, this is the question: is it exploitation? Are we taking advantage of this lower industrialized area, or are we giving them opportunity to make money and build up their state, their country, or their location by bringing in this business and bringing in money and jobs to help build their infrastructure and so forth? Um, and corporations and stuff have to weigh, they weigh their costs and profits versus their morals and ethics of how they do this and how they balance this. Um, Workers in a particular job or workplace organized into a group that fights for higher wages and better working conditions. That is a union. Okay, union dues are fees paid by workers to support the union operations. People usually join unions for the protection or benefits that they may offer. Um, and one of those is bargaining, collective bargaining. It's a process by which a group of employees, usually a union, negotiates a contract with an employer. If, all the employers come to the, employer, all the employees come to this employer through this union and say, hey, we're not going to work anymore until you put a Coke machine in the lounge. I mean, I know that's a silly one. I'm just throwing out something. Uh, then more than likely, because all of the employees are saying this, the employer is probably going to put the Coke machine in the lounge. Individual bargaining, individual workers negotiate with their employer directly. That right there doesn't carry near as much weight if one person says, hey, I'm not going to work anymore until you put that Coke machine. Okay, you're fired. You see how that works. Bargaining power is the level of strength enjoyed by one side in a negotiation. Collective bargaining powers. These are some rules. There are rules set by what unions and so forth can do. Industrial action. Steps taken by workers to affect production in order to influence employers. Strikes. Okay, workers quit working. You've seen this on TV a ton of times. Slow down. Workers intentionally reduce productivity. Oh, well, normally I make 25 widgets an hour. Well, now I'm only making 10 widgets an hour. So I didn't stop working, but I just ain't working as effectively. So you're losing profit. And then lobbying the government to have the government pass rules and regulations. Now, a lot of that usually ties in with, safety protocol. Uh, Sometimes it's like wages and so forth. But employers fight back with strike breakers. They're also referred to as scabs. These are the people that everybody hates in the movies, because they're coming in to work in the place of someone who is on strike. And this always upsets the people who are on strike because they're weakening their bargaining powers. And lockout, it prevents workers from entering a workplace. So they're now not working and they're not getting paid. And so these are several things that are used during bargaining. The National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA, in 1935 regulates the collective bargaining, giving certain rights to unions and sets up specific procedures, making legalized strikes, preventing employers from firing employees involved in union actions. They can investigate abuses by employers and review disputes between unions and employers. The Taft-Hartley Act in 1947 was an amendment to the NLRA. It required unions to give 60 days notice of a strike. Hey, we're going to strike. This is when we're going to strike. It outlawed some forms of industrial actions, and it regulated unions. And this just gives you an idea to look at wages and see how wages have increased. They're talking about sending a new wage increase in the United States right now. If you listen to President Obama's State of the Union address recently in 2014, he was talking about increasing the minimum wage up to $10.10 an hour. Uh, this sounds great on a basic level, but this usually winds up being bad because you increase the minimum wage. It goes up, and the companies are not going to take a loss. So now they're having to pay more money out. They're going to increase their prices of their goods. So now the minimum wage people are now paying the same thing for the goods that they would have been because the money's been adjusted. The goods cost more, well, they're making a little bit more. What it really winds up hurting are the people in the middle. Anybody who's making above minimum wage. Let's say minimum wage was the $7 and you were making the $10. Well, they bumped it up. Your employer is not just going to give you a $3 raise, you're now at the minimum wage. So rather than making over what minimum wage was and having some extra money, you're now going to be at that minimum wage level. So basically, it just raises the poverty level because everything is going to increase in price. So be careful what you ask for sometimes for this increase of like wages and so forth, because this is the kind of thing that usually happens. And a lot of times the politicians don't want you to really see how this whole thing works, because it goes just to make more people dependent on what the politicians are doing. And then there's unemployment insurance. Money is taken out of your check that goes into a fund, and if you become unemployed and qualify, you may receive money. You had to be at the job for a specific amount of time, and you must actually be looking for a job, and this only lasts for a limited time. So until next time, deuces.